Hello, wastrels and wildlings. My name is TBSky, and Riot have just released a whole bunch of new information about the Wild Rift mobile version of League of Legends that's coming to mobile devices sometimes, or something about an open beta. I wasn't really paying attention because I'm not going to be playing it on mobile, but I am going to be paying attention to these excellent new character animations and new character models, sometimes almost entirely new character designs in a few ways. Isn't that fascinating? So this is a montage of the champions that are going to be in the game at the launch of Wild Rift, with obviously a lot more to come, but this is the stuff that they're rolling out for like the open beta that is coming, I don't know, sometime. And what I immediately noticed is that multiple champions don't look quite the way I remember them from in-game in League of Legends, and not just because these are clearly much higher fidelity models, but because there has been substantial changes made to a few of their character designs. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in this particular video. Now, once the game is out, and people start posting full compilations of all of these animation sets on the internet, then probably I'll grab some of those and we'll do an animation breakdown to really get into some of the really high-quality animation that's on display here. But for the purposes of this video, primarily, we'll be focusing on discussing some of the differences in character design and some of the changes that have been made to these characters for the Wild Rift mobile game. Now, watching these, one of the first things you might be asking yourself is, hang on, these seem to, like, look a lot better, some of them, than the models we actually get in the frickin' PC version of League of Legends. So how the hell is it that Riot have done all this work to update these models, but they just don't port them over directly into the PC version? Like, why does our PC version of Gragas still look the way he does and not like the cool new version that we got here? And there's a couple of answers to that. Again, I'm not working internally at Riot, so I can't give you authoritative answers. You'll probably get answers like from Rioters, but the thing is, these models were built from the ground up for Wild Rift, and these are not the character models that you'll be seeing in-game in Wild Rift. I pretty much guarantee it. They're way too high fidelity for a mobile game like that. These are character models that I believe were built specifically for, well, what they're doing right now, doing these victory poses. And I think this is going to be like the end screen after you win a game or something along those lines. You're going to get this victory pose thing. And they seem to have created individual ones for the various skins that they're going to be selling for the characters as well. So that's going to be one of the cosmetic sort of draws into buying champions and buying skins, is that you get these cool new victory animations after you win a game. But what that means is that these models were designed specifically to do this, like to do a bunch of anime bullshit, to stand around to look cool, and they were not, therefore, designed or even rigged to be put into the video game. Like, a character model that's supposed to work in a video game has a few requirements that a model that's only designed to be animated by an animator don't necessarily have. So you can't just take the models that they have here and port them directly onto the PC. Like, probably there's a lot of work that could be transferred. Who knows what Riot is going to do with this, but certainly I hope that Jenna makes the transition over. But it is a question of, like, this stuff was built for Wild Rift. It was not built for the League of Legends PC client, and to port it over would be a crap ton of work, and Riot themselves have their own internal calculations about how much is that worth, and is that worth it compared to doing a full rework, blah, 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 etc. But that's the long version of a short answer as to why these don't just get ported to the PC immediately, because they clearly look so much better. Anyway, main focus of this video is going to be the changes to character design that have happened, which means I'm going to have to wrangle this particular media player into giving me the frames that I want to see. There we go. I'm going to start with, well, most obvious place to start, which is Ahri, who has been changed. Not at all, really. Well, that's not quite true. But she has been mostly not changed in a substantive way. This is very much still the same basic character design that she retains in the PC version of League of Legends, which makes sense because she's one of the most popular characters. Why on earth would they change her? Still, a few minor changes have happened. For example, the tassels that hang down from her handbok here. In-game, they're red and orange. Here, it's purple. She's got this leg strap thing going on that I don't believe that she has in-game. Her boots look completely different. Like, that's a complete reconstruction of what they look like in-game. And the accents around her handbok have been turned to gold, where on her outfit in the actual video game, they look more like they're painted on, like they're a dye job. Here, they seem to be made of metal gold stitched onto the onto the outfit. There's also been a slight change made to her bust, as it were, not in terms of its size at all, but in terms of how her outfit is connected to it. The outfit that's in-game, and I think that's probably at least partly a limit of the character model, basically has her wearing like a tube top that just kind of squeezes her breast, but it doesn't really have that V-shaped bit of cleavage that you can see on this version of the model. And also, the sleeves don't connect quite so smoothly to her top on the in-game model, which is partly due to that character model being, frankly, at this point, really rather old. Now, for Master Yi, there aren't really any substantive changes. They've kept his stupid sword boots that I hate because they're stupid and he never uses the swords for anything. But outside of that, it's just a higher fidelity version, I think, of the updated version of the character that's in the game right now. Like, it looks nicer, but it's not in any substantive way really different. Lux, on the other hand, has had herself, let's see if I can grab the frame that I need for her, though. There. Has had herself a really nice bit of a glow-up. Now, she still wears boob plate, which, you know, that's my particular bugbear, and she doesn't quite look like the way that she does in stuff like, for example, Legends of Runeterra, but she has been changed rather substantively from the model that she has in League of Legends proper. First of all, her staff just looks a lot nicer. In-game, in the PC version right now, it's more of like, it's just like kind of a gold thing that's sort of slightly twisty. Here it looks like much more of a like metal scepter. It has a much sleeker and nicer look. And generally speaking, a lot of her gold accents, which are present all over her character design in League of Legends on the PC, have been changed and modified to be silver accents for her character look in the Wild Rift game. There's been changes to her chest armor. The boob plates is much less it's much less pronounced. It's been smoothed over a lot. She has these new shoulder ring pieces that sit over there, giving her a little bit of shoulder padding that she doesn't really have in the main game. And she's got these armor-plated things, this skirts, sort of hanging off her waist, which are not present in the PC version of the game either. Same thing with her boots. These little triangular knee protectors aren't present on her PC version boots either. And again, lots of gold accents have been changed into silver. Now for Annie, again, very, very, very little substantive change. I really can't see anything that's substantively different between this and the in-game PC model. It looks nicer. It's a higher fidelity model, but the same fundamental character design has very much been preserved, even though it makes no sense for Annie to look like that in any way, shape, or form. But if you want more information about that, please see my character design ranking tier list stream thing for my full thoughts on her. Same thing goes for Garen. Garen is very much the same as he has always been. He looks the way that he has kind of always looked, with the caveat again being that he has been substantially upgraded in terms of his character model fidelity. There's some minor changes, like for example, he seems to be wearing some kind of armored padding on his pants now, where in-game he's got these hammer pants things going on. There's been some color hue changes, where in-game Garen is a little bit more bronze than gold. Here we see a much more distinct, like, silver and gold, and very sheer gray for the armor that fits the modern aesthetic of Demacia better, where Garen in-game is much more brownish in a lot of his hues and colors. His belt has been changed a little bit, but other than that, it's not really a substantive update to the character. And that's very much the story for Fiora as well. She looks much the same as she does in the main game, with really nary a difference to be found, I think. This is probably one of the closest ones to what the character looks like in-game, in League of Legends right now, with the only difference I can really see is that this strange little chest piece collar thing that she's got going on is a bit bigger than it is in her PC version, but that's sort of about it. Same story for Vi, not really any major changes to write home about, she just looks nicer. Blitzcrank, though, is the first place where we get to see our first, like, really big major change, because my boy looks like a whole new man bot. It's a new character design. Basically, it's a new character design. And that's at least partly due to Blitzcrank being, first of all, an iconic character for League of Legends. Like, this is a character that a lot of people associate with the game. He's been in the game for ages, and he has, like, a meme status because of his incredibly annoying hook that he throws out. But where the original character model from the original League of Legends at this is not only showing its age, but it looks positively archaic, where Blitzcrank is barely more than like a ball with giant pizza feet and these absolutely comically, ridiculously clunky, oversized hands that don't really look like hands so much as they just look like a bunch of metal that's been randomly smashed together into vaguely the shape of hands. Here, a lot of sleeking down has been done to Blitzcrank. His shape has been clarified a lot. He's still primarily composed of a ball-like body as like the primary sort of source of his shape language, but the way that his head sits within that thing has been clarified a lot with this like circular slot at the top that his face comes out of. His face has been made symmetrical as well, which it really isn't on the original character model. The unnecessary spikes that were on his shoulders in the original character model are gone. The vents at the back of his character model look a lot nicer now and less protruding, like they're less disruptive to the overall silhouette of the character. Now, most details have been kept in the sense that he's got these screws sitting on his hands, and that his hands are still comically oversized compared to what they should be proportionally to like a human person, but you can see his thumbs and his fingers are much more articulated, and it makes a lot more sense that they would be able to like flex and grab the way that you would expect him to be able to when his whole thing is grabbing people. Then there's his chest piece, where here you've got a turbine sitting there, like creating power, I guess, apparently spinning around, generating some sort of force, where on the original model you just got a closed off plate that really doesn't do anything. He's also got a much nicer hip assembly, where in the original it's like basically it's a little triangle that sits there, and then his legs kind of come off it like he's some kind of gingerbread man. Here you can see that there are actually, okay, there's hip joints, and then there's like knee joints, which really he barely has on the original character model as well, and the feet have been de-emphasized a lot. The color has also changed. Like, original Blitzcrank in the game right now is bright orangey yellow. Like, he's really a shiny boy. This version has been much more furnished down to something much more like a bronze, rather than that like bright gold that he has, that cartoony aesthetic that he came from. Then we have Camille. Now, Camille, again, character design-wise, no changes that I can really discern. She looks the same as she ever has. And the same thing goes for characters like Jin, who they've kept like very close to. Like, he's just got a much nicer looking model, really, is the only thing with him. To the point where I think there's actually some details on this model that weren't present on the original. I think some of the detail on his mask, for example, you just kind of can't see on the original character model. But outside of that, no real changes to Senior Sociopath of the League of Legends PC version. Same thing with Ezreal, and then we get my girl Janna. Now, as you may know, the perfect way to make Janna's character design absolutely S tier, like the best it can possibly be, would be to make her completely naked. I have expressed that opinion many times before, that if you want a wind spirit, then like either give her a big robe that can really flow around in the wind and show like the whole eddies of wind always flowing around her, or make her freaking, like, if you want to have the sexy titty babe lady wind spirit, then just make her naked and go for it. Riot, for some reason that probably has something to do with censorship, opted not to follow that particular suggestion and have given us rather a Janna who is, well, who's like more sensibly dressed now than she was, because in-game Janna floats around in underwear. Like, it's a bra and panties is what she's wearing. That's really the only thing that's going on there. And she looks ridiculous, and her hair was modeled at a time when hair animation was kind of foreign to League of Legends. So she just has this piece of hair that just kind of sits on top of her head like a giant spring onion or something. And looks terrible. That has been substantially changed in her new character model here. Let's see if we can... where you can see like her hair has individual strands that are individually animated. Her ears have been clarified a lot as well, by the way. On her in-game character model on the PC right now, her ears basically form a unified piece with the hair. They sort of like barely visible as distinctive elf ears. Here with Janna, you get much more of a sense of like the ears being a thing that change her silhouette as a character, which makes her look distinctively less human-like. Like, she looks much more like she's an elf or something along those lines, which is one of the problems that the original Janna also has, is like that she just looks like a normal-ass floating half-naked lady. She doesn't really look like a wind spirit or a god or anything ethereal or unreal in any meaningful way, and that has changed a lot with just the clarification of the silhouette of those goddamn ears. Outside of that, they've still gone with, like, again, Janna is a wind spirit, so her whole thing is wind is always flowing around her. How do you show that wind is always flowing? Well, you have stuff billowing in the wind, and the way they've solved that here is the same thing they've done in the PC game, which is to have her have these skirts of things that billow and flow around her all the time, as well as, of course, the movement of the hair, which, again, is where she's such a natural fit for robes, like big billowing robes with like a big hood and like a big cloak that can really kind of flow around in the wind. But they want to keep the sexy factor, I guess, which, yeah, if you want to go all in, that just make her naked. So they've kind of settled for sort of a half measure where instead of having her float around in her underwear for no discernible reason, now at least she has a kind of a tunic that makes a little bit more sense and probably prevents the game from being tagged with censorship when it comes to release on mobile platforms where, I don't know, are the standards stricter there? They actually might be. Anyway, Janna is like a massive glow-up of a character design change. And she looks like just substantively way, way, way better than she used to. And I do hope that this is something that they decide to eventually do the work that's going to be necessary to port this character design, not the model necessarily, but the character design into the main League of Legends game. It could kind of be achieved just by a texture update in some ways, I think. Because this at least looks more coherent. It looks more like, okay, they actually thought about what the hell they were doing rather than, it's a titty babe in underwear, I don't know, something floaty, blah, blah, which characterizes the original design. Moving us on to Soraka, who, I can't be sure, but her eyes look a little bit like she's got proper goat's eyes. And I can't remember what those are called. They're called, what are they called? Ungulate eyes, something along those lines. But that's a kind of eye that you often find in herbivores like goats and sheep, that allows them a wider field of view to scan for predators. And it's kind of funny to see that seemingly kind of being present with Soraka here. Which is something that I certainly don't think that she has on her in-game model, or if she does, it's like so she's so small and so undetailed that you hardly notice it. Outside of that, though, Soraka looks much like herself. There's some added detail, especially around her horn, where you can see she has this sheath thing, whatever the hell that is, that kind of sits there. The gem that she's got on the front of her suit has been de-emphasized a little bit. It's been made a little bit smaller so that it looks less ridiculous. You can see certain details about her hair has been changed, like where in-game she just has these kind of two bangs that just kind of sit there. Here, her hair looks a little bit more strand-like and natural. The staff just looks updated, like it just looks nicer. She has had some changes to her arms, where in the PC version she wears like straps of cloth kind of wrapped around her hands, almost like a mummy gauze or something. It's been changed into an actual gauntlet here, and her dress has been extended downwards a little bit. Now, in-game, Soraka is basically, like, her tunic basically goes into a G-string. Oh, hang on. Clicked the wrong thing there. Showing a lot of her hip, all the way above there. It's been covered up a little bit with these much larger pouch straps, and you can see a little bit of cloth has been added to the dress to make it look less like she's wearing like a leotard that turns into a G-string and more like she's wearing some kind of a bodysuit that's perhaps a little bit more acceptable. These decorations on her chest also are new, mostly a bit of added detail from the PC model, and then she's got these boots. I don't know what you would call those, like these sheath things for her lower legs, where again in game it's just like she's wrapped gauze around her legs a bunch of times. Nami looks pretty much the same as she always has. Same thing goes for Nasus, here recreating pretty much his splash art. Added details, but no real substantive changes to the character design. Braum, well, Braum is here, and he looks the way that he does. While Miss Fortune, on the other hand, I'm a little bit unsure what Riot are doing with her right now, because recently in Legends of Runeterra, they updated her card art to actually give her a bare midriff, which is what she has in the main League of Legends video game. But in her previous, in the launch art that she had for Rising Tides, she had this outfit on, like much more covered up, much less cleavage going on than you've got on her in-game character model in the main game right now. So I'm not really sure where Riot are going with this, like whether this is a little bit more of a cover-up job to keep the game more PG for the mobile market, or if they have some kind of internal debate about how exactly they want to change her character design. Besides that, though, very few things in terms of substantive changes. I think her sleeves sit a little bit lower on her arm now. I think there's some small changes to, like, she's got this belt with this anchor buckle thing going on that she doesn't have in the main PC version, but outside of little details like that, no real changes to Miss Fortune. Same thing goes for Graves. He looks much the same as he always has. Jinx, too, is pretty much as she has always been in the PC version. But then there's Alistar, who, again, not that there's a substantive change to him, but more than the rest of the characters who mostly just look the same, Alistar's character model looks like way better, like substantial upgrade, and there's been some changes to his proportions as well. Now, this might be partly because in-game on the PC especially, Alistar needs a really recognizable profile, so they oversize his head and his horns a little bit, but on this particular character model, the head and the horns have been downsized a lot, which makes the rest of his body look that much bigger, which makes him look much more stronger, much more imposing. Like, that's a really basic thing in character design. Take a look at the Hulk in the Avengers movies, for example, or literally any character in superhero comics where you want the character to look really big and bulky. The artist will tend to de-emphasize and make smaller the head of the character in order to make the body feel that much more bulky, which is a substantive change that's been made to Alistar, is that his head has just been made a lot smaller and his horns have been made a lot smaller to give that giant hulking upper body more room to be like the major part of his character design. He's also got this fur under his manacles that he doesn't have in the PC version of his character model, and the braids in his beard here, those little metal rings, are also an entirely new addition for Wild Rift. But outside of that, like outside of that small character design change of de-emphasizing the head to make the rest of the body look bigger, he looks much the same as he has. Olaf, on the other hand, well, on the one hand, he looks exactly the same, completely stereotypical, kind of boring, bad Viking warrior character design that he's always had. On the other hand, like, just the sheer upgrading quality from what he looks like in the original PC version of him is... it makes it a huge change just because it looks so much better. It's kind of like with Blitzcrank, where it's like, it's not that the character design has been super revamped or completely changed or anything, it's just been clarified a lot what he actually is supposed to be about. And this version of Olaf, much more than the one in game, you have a clarification of what his beard is supposed to be. Where in the PC version, it's just he's got this long hair, and then he's got these beard strands just kind of randomly scattered around his body, and then he's got this short stubby beard around his head. Here you have this giant wild lion's mane of a beard, much more clearly like representing that general idea of like a big bearded maniac like running at with two glowing axes, which is another change that's come to the character model, where just these axes look a lot more Freljordian now. In-game, on its character model, they just kind of look like generic battle axes that could come from anywhere. Here you can see you've got this blocky design that is emblematic of a lot of Freljord character design, especially a lot of Freljord weapon and architectural design that's been added to the axes to ground him a little bit more in that particular region, which he really kind of... well, he really kind of isn't, because he still doesn't look like he comes from anywhere in the Freljord whatsoever. He just looks like a generic Viking who wandered in from some awful History Channel show. Then there's Gragas, another example of a complete... oh, hang on. Bit of an overlay there, I don't know what to deal with. A complete rebuild of the original character model, and there's been not a lot of changes to him, but a couple of interesting substantive changes from a character design perspective. For example, his loincloth now has been clarified somewhat and I use the word clarified a lot because that's kind of really just, it's the same concept, but we've done it better so that it's more obvious what it's supposed to do. His bulk has been changed and de-emphasized in a few ways. Like, in-game PC version of Gragas is just like a blob on legs. There really isn't a lot of articulation to him. Here, you get much more the sense of an actual fat man rather than just like a big ball of fat with a head stuck on it. Here he looks much more distinctive like a fat man, and the loincloth especially, because it's much more a substantive part of his character model now, where in the PC version it's just this little fringe of cloth that just kind of hangs under his belly. This looks a little bit more Freljordian now, just because that blue has now become a substantial part of his character design. So Gragas' character design in the PC version, because you always see him from the top down, you pretty much just get the red beard and sort of the grayish, pallid, ugly skin that he's got. But now, with the blue being much more a part of his personal color palette, you have this contrast between the red beard and the blue loincloth that places him more in the Freljord. And something else that does that is the increased emphasis on his tattoos, which are a lot more obvious now. Some of the scars that he's got in the PC version have also been removed, but the tattoos do a lot more to sort of say, oh, okay, there's some kind of barbarian warrior kind of concept thing going on here, and that, generally speaking, works a lot better. He also just looks a lot more handsome. Like, his in-game version on the PC model is this sort of Lord of the Rings troll-esque caricature of someone who's just supposed to look comically awful and fat and ugly and unappealing. Here, it looks a lot more like he's an actual, fucking person. They've also changed a little bit about the ropes that Gragas wears for some reason. I've never been able to understand what the hell the deal was with those particular ropes. They said they snug around his arms in the PC version, just like they're squeezing sausage together or something. I don't know what the hell they're supposed to be for. Here, you can see them being used to accentuate and emphasize the musculature on his arms, especially. Well, like, you can see this giant muscular shoulder being brought down into this upper arm, like, where they emphasize his form. They show off a little bit of what he's got going on, rather than just being these weird, awkward rubber bands stretched around his flabby body. Like, God, just the PC version of Gragas looks so ugly. And especially compared to this, again, this is one of those things where I hope they take some of the design work that's been done here and port that into just a nicer looking character model for the poor guy in League of Legends, because I don't think he's going to get a visual update anytime soon, to be frank. Then there's Jax. And again, no real change to his character design. We'll get to that with Malphite. No real change to his character design, but let me just, I don't want to frame by frame my way through all of the animations here, but let me just frame by frame my way through this one. Because look how articulated his cape is, look what like his hairpiece can do, and then look what the lamp can do when he swings it up. You see that? Oh, that looks nice. And it's a subtle thing, really. But you see how the head of the lamp bends? And how when he lifts it up, it unfolds, which is one of the things that you can do with a higher fidelity character model, is you can break the model. You can deform the rig a little bit, and it looks so nice. Like, Jax just looks so appealing. And I also love the use of after images here to generate a spin effect, because in reality, all Jax really does is, like, he spins it around, like, once there. But because of all these after images that they've got going on in the animation, you get the sense that it's much more of a thing. And it just looks really nice. And I really want to talk about these animations, but I'm going to wait until someone posts, like, a really high, preferably 4K version of them, so I can download them and look at all of them. Anyway, moving on to Malphite, my boy. And he is a bit of a Janna situation, in the sense that the basic concept of his character design hasn't been changed, but everything about him has been updated to look just so much nicer than it does in the main game right now. His color profile has changed. In-game, in the PC version, he's mostly red and brown, but in this version, he's characterized a lot more by gray, and a much more muted, rather than the reddish maroon that he's got in the PC version. Here, he's got this sort of colder, clay-looking brown color going on underneath the sheer sharpness of the rocks, and also the sharpness of his general character design. Malphite in the PC version is a bit of an odd mix of completely different design aesthetics. He's got parts of his armor that are rounded and kind of conical and look sort of like the kind of spikes you'd see on Sonic the Hedgehog almost, and then he's got parts of his design that are all like square and geometric shapes of stone that was like jutting out from, especially from around his knees and stuff, and it's all a fucking mishmash, and it all looks kind of terrible. And his head on his in-game character model is also ugly. Like, it's just this little tiny spiky thing that pokes out of the top of his body and doesn't really have any real character to it. It's got this big lower jaw, but nothing else going on. This version, you have this crown of stone framing his face, and then his face and mouth being highlighted by green energy pulsing out from inside it. Now, in the lore of League of Legends, Malphite has had a new origin created for himself, where he is the shard of the monolith. Like, he's a piece of an ancient monolith that was designed to fight the void, and it was built by Kiana's people in Ishtal. And this looks a lot more plausibly like that could be that. Like, it could be like a shard of a living weapon that broke off and sort of became a living rock monster. Where original Malphite, like, he didn't even really look like a rock monster. He looked like some kind of muscly dude who had, like, rock stuff on him. But this looks much like... I do like the detail that they've given him rock abs and this, like, giant dick bulge at the front. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they thought he needed it. But generally speaking, Malphite here just looks way more like, you know, a rock. Like, he looks like a rock monster in a believable way that just isn't present. His feet have also been turned away from the pizza feet that he's got on his original ancient character model and look a lot more sensible now. I have to expect that, because we know Malphite has had this new lore, this is probably something that's closer to what Malphite looks like canonically than how he looks in the PC version of the game. And I imagine when or if he gets a character design update or a complete rework, which I wouldn't hold my breath because he's just not a very popular character, or if he shows up in Legends of Runeterra, he'll probably look a lot more like this. Then there's Shyvana. Again, not a substantive change to her dragon form, as far as I can tell, but there is one rather major change, or a couple, actually, rather major changes to her human form. She's wearing pants now. Shyvana doesn't have pants in the main game at all. She has bare legs. Like, she has this hip guard thing, armor plating, whatever it is. Then she has bare legs, and then she wears boots. That has been substantially changed here, where Shyvana is wearing... I don't even know if they are pants or if they're supposed to be scales or something, but she's wearing certainly a pair of leg coverings that lead into these clawed feet boots that she's got going on. Let me see if I can scroll back and see if we can get a better look at them. Not really. Okay. This is, like, way more dragon-like. Like, in-game in the PC version, she's just wearing boots, like leather boots. They look like completely ordinary boots, too. But in Wild Rift, clearly there's more of a dragon-like feature to her. Now, Shyvana, we know, is going to be the next one to get a rework after the Volibear rework comes out. So this is presumably... Like, I don't know how they're going to handle that with Wild Rift, whether they're going to update her character model in Wild Rift as well when she has a rework on the PC version or what. But this is certainly a much nicer looking version of how she looks on PC right now, just in terms, again, of clarifying the character design somewhat. Especially with her dragon crown thing here. You can see all of these spiky... So you have this edge that comes down here, and then this curve in, and then it goes into this V shape. That's not really present on her PC model at all. Like, she just has, like, a smooth set of curves on her helmet. It's very smoothly and very sort of sleek in its design. This is much more spiky, much more jagged than her PC version, which makes it look much more like a dragon's crest, like the horns coming off of an animal's head, rather than some kind of shaped metal that's vaguely supposed to look like an animal. Aurelion Sol, pretty much the same as he is in game. I don't see any substantial changes to him. And with Orianna, again, an upgrade. She's kind of another Janna situation where this is just like a much, much, much nicer realization of the exact same concept. Where in-game, again, Orianna is such an old character model. She's mostly designed around, like, these really jerky, sort of, clockwork-like movements like that. And here, they seem to have changed her movement aesthetic rather substantially to be... Like, still, you can still see that jerky animation thing going on with her. Like, look at how she pulls the ball back. Like that. And you can see a little bit of clockwork jitter when she's down here. It's kind of hard to see here, but you can kind of see how she vibrates a little bit, and then she does that. So there's still a little bit of that stiffness in there. But generally speaking, she has a much smoother design aesthetic, and they haven't changed anything substantive about her character design. Once again, they've made her head smaller in comparison to her body, where on her PC character model, the head is a lot bigger than the rest of the character. And that has two effects. First of all, it just makes her look more well-proportioned, but it also makes her look less childish. Where in-game, on the PC version, she does look like an adolescent, like a teenager. In terms of her proportions, almost prepubescent a little bit. Here, because she has a smaller head in comparison to the rest of her body, she looks a lot more adult rather than looking like a sort of a child. And that's, I mean, I don't imagine lore is going to matter at all to Wild Rift, but in the lore, that makes a little bit more sense, because in the lore nowadays, as far as I remember, Orianna is an older character. Like, she's someone who was apprenticed to her father, who helped the sick of Son try and breathe through poison with mechanical contraptions, and Orianna was his assistant for a long time, who gradually had to replace her own body with mechanical parts as more and more of her got sick and more of her broke down and she couldn't do the work, until eventually she turned into a complete Hextech doll creation. But she was much more of an adult character, where in her original lore, way back in the day, she was essentially a crazy inventor trying to create a daughter for himself. So it made sense for the character model to be more childish, whereas here, because her character was more adult in the lore, it makes sense for that to be a somewhat more adult character. There's been some changes to her texturing, where in the original she had all of this really, really elaborate carving work done on her character model, like just a lot of etchings and decorations and stuff. Most of that has been taken away. You can still see some of it present on her legs, but mostly that has been smoothed down and simplified quite a lot, to be kind of less overwhelming when you look at the character. There's been a few changes to the shape language of her skirt as well, where it's less sharp and pointy and more like thick and heavy looking than it is on her PC character model, where it's very small and slight and kind of flimsy-ish. But outside of that, Orianna looks much the same as she ever has. Fizz, again, just a much, much nicer character model. He just looks better, but no substantive changes to anything about his character, really. Ash, on the other hand, now this character design comes, I think, directly from Legends of Runeterra, or maybe it was developed for both things all at once. But she definitely looks a lot more like she does in her leveled up splash art in Legends of Runeterra. And generally speaking, this character design, yes, it's a lot better than what we have in-game right now, because at least she's got a little bit of fur up around her shoulder pad. At least, like, her clothes cover up a little bit more of her body in a way that makes a little bit more sense for the Freljord. She's got this, like, thick leather belt, and she's got, like, these thick, I guess, linen or cotton strips around her waist, and, like, her cleavage is somewhat less pronounced, her hood is a little bit bigger, her cloak looks a little bit thicker. Generally speaking, she's more blue. Like, in-game, on the PC version, her design aesthetic is white hair, black clothes, and gold accents. Here, the accents, the base color of her clothing is much more blue, rather than black and brown. And she's still got the gold accenting, but it's been cooled off a little bit so that it's less saturated and looks a little bit more appropriate. Like, I would still have preferred if it was just metal and silver, but looks a little bit more appropriate for someone who comes from the Freljord. They've also taken away her ridiculous metal boots, which I never understood why she was wearing, and just given her these thigh-high, whatever you would call these things, but these thigh-high things that she's wearing, which is just a simplified version of her character design in that sense, but it also looks sleeker and a lot better, and still, I would prefer if she wore some goddamn pants. She's from the Freljord, god damn it. Anyway. Tryndamere, again, just an upgraded character model. If you actually take a look at Tryndamere's in-game character model right now, it looks a little bit ridiculous, because he's such an old character. Oi! That's what I get for talking too much. There's been some minor changes to his character design in terms of, for example, like the horns on his helmet point directly upwards right now. They don't really do that on his PC version, where he's got horns that jut out more to the side. There's a lot more detail that's been added to his shoulder piece and his arm guard. And the same thing goes for like his belt, like this skull-ish looking thing that he's got going on. His color profile has also changed a little bit, where Tryndamere in the PC version, all of the accents around the gems and stuff on his weapons and his clothes are all very bright blue. Here, they've got much more of a greenish teal aesthetic going on with them. There's also, like, thicker plating, I think, around his waist with the chainmail thing. Like, it looks a little bit more substantive than it does in-game. He's also got a leather belt around his waist, which he doesn't have in the original, and the strap that he's got over his chest has been sized up substantially. One, I don't know if it's a major change, but it's certainly a change, is this pendant. He doesn't have that in the PC version, so they've added that one to his character model here. Does he have that in his splash art? I actually can't remember. Twisted Fate, very much the same as he is in the PC game. Vayne, same story again. Not really any substantive changes to her character design at all. Now, Xin Zhao, actually, if you look at his character model in-game, he looks like a really old, grumpy man. Like, his face just looks terrible. It's again, very old character model, but it was also a very different conception of the character, where he was a lot older and a lot more like a general, rather than the young attendant of Prince Jarvan. So here, he's been made a lot hotter and a lot younger looking. His eyebrows have been made smaller and stuff like that, and his colors have been clarified a little bit to fit more with the general Demacian aesthetic we have nowadays, where it's all like white and gold and sheer silvery gray. Where again, much like Garen on his in-game model, Xin Zhao is like very saturated golds, very brown, much warmer in his colors than Demacia is nowadays. Zed has had, well, a little bit of a glow-up. All these gold accents on his weapons and his shoulders and his headpiece, all of that has been added to his character model, which I don't know that I like it that much as a character piece, because we know Zed from the lore isn't really a braggart. Like, he's not really someone who likes to stand out a lot. That's not really his style. That's not really his deal, but it certainly does make his character model pop a lot more. It makes him look a lot more distinctive. There's been a few proportional changes to some bits of his armor, some bits of his headgear, like the gold accent on his head is still present on the PC version of Zed, but it's much smaller compared to how big it is on the head of the character model here. Some of the changes they've made here might also be for in-game readability, where Zed, maybe his original color design was too dark and murky and made him hard to see on the mobile version, who knows? And that's why they added this bright gold to contrast with the red and blue and brown and gray that generally characterizes the rest of his character design. Yasuo, no real substantive changes. He looks much the same as he always has, and the same thing goes for Ziggs, where it's, again, just a case of an upgraded character model with nothing else really changed about it. And that, after 41 minutes of me rambling on, is all of the changes that I could find, at least at a glance, to the character models coming to Wild Rift. Again, don't expect a lot of this to make its way back over to the PC version of League of Legends, unless you ask, unless you make a stink about it, unless you, like, message the developers and go, hey, those Wild Rift character models look excellent. I would love for Lux's model in the PC game to look more like the one in Wild Rift. I would love for Shyvana or Janna to look more like they do in Wild Rift. Like, that kind of thing, maybe they'll listen to. Don't harass anyone, obviously, but, you know, you can point it out to them. Anyway, if you've enjoyed watching me ramble about character models in the League of Legends mobile game, then you can hit the like, comment, and or subscribe buttons down below in whatever order and combination that you feel like, and that helps me out because of something algorithm blah blah numbers-ish. I don't fully understand it, but that's the received YouTube wisdom, is that that's how you make your way in the world as a YouTuber. If you want to support me more directly than that, then I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. If you want to use any of them to help me out, I'd greatly appreciate it, and if not, that's completely okay as well. At the end of my videos, though, I do try to encourage people to, generally speaking, support content that they enjoy with direct contributions, because, like, living on ad revenue as a YouTuber is an uncertain gamble at the best of times, and during times of global stress, like, for example, a pandemic, where markets are crashing and people are becoming jobless, advertisers are pulling their advertisements from online platforms left and right, making ad revenue even less valuable than it has ever been. Now, it hasn't affected me too badly because I'm in the gaming space, but for some YouTubers, they've seen a decline of as much as 50% of their ad revenue over the past few months. So, if there is content online that you enjoy, please consider supporting it directly with literally anything you can, a bit of pocket change that you put lying around, because it matters so much more than you think. Anyway, Right, last thing I have to advertise is that I have a second channel. That's the last thing, I promise. Where I do Let's Plays and I do streams over there. Most of my streaming happens on that particular channel. Currently, we're playing through Final Fantasy IX, as well as a little bit of Majora's Mask, and I'm playing some Legends of Runeterra over there as well, playing with ridiculous decks that people are sending me to mess around and lose a lot with. So if that sounds interesting to you, head on over there, like, comment, subscribe, blah, 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 YouTube. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you very much for watching. And please remember to wash your hands.